So we're going to look at residency status. What is residency status? Okay, according to the U.S. Immigration Service, residency status refers to a foreign national's legal status in a country where they are not a citizen. In the United States, a lawful permanent resident, LPR, or green card holder refers to the immigration status of a foreign national who is authorized to live and work in the U.S. permanently. Okay, so did you know that there are three different tax residency statuses for non-US citizens? The first one is resident aliens, non-resident aliens, and the third, dual status aliens. So that's a resident, non-resident, dual status. Residency statuses can have a big impact on taxable income. Okay. Um, well, let's go through it. So residency status is, we'll start with resident alien. Okay, so you have resident, non-resident, and dual status. So let's say someone comes in from India, right? There is an Indian citizen changed their tax status from non-resident alien to resident alien in the United States. Which form may they need to fill to report the U.S. sourced income? Which form would they need to fill? They would need to fill Form 1040 and Form 1040NR. Remember, we went through those. Okay, so if say, somebody's daughter is a U.S. citizen living and working outside of the U.S., and their annual income is $85,000, which option is correct? So, do you think um, so? They live and work outside of the U.S. Their mom is a U.S. citizen. Do you think they should file? It, yes, they do. So they are a U.S. citizen living and working outside of the U.S. That's right, they should file. I believe the cutoff is 80,000. So we'll just roll straight into dependents. What is a dependent? Okay, what is a dependent? A dependent is someone that the taxpayer supports by providing at least half of the person's total support for the year. When claiming a dependent for tax purposes, there are five qualifying questions to consider, each of which may have additional requirements that must be met. To claim a dependent, a taxpayer will need to review the dependency requirements to determine if their dependent qualifies. Okay, you have to review the dependency requirements. Okay, who are dependents? The term dependent means a qualifying child or a qualifying relative. To claim a person as your dependent, they must meet either the qualified child or qualified relative test. It consists of using this five-step process. Okay, so the step is as the five steps are as follows. Okay, so The five steps include step number one, do you have a qualifying child? Step two, is your qualified child or dependent? Does the qualified child qualify you for the child credit or for other dependents? Step four, is your qualifying relative your dependent? Does your qualifying relative qualify you for the credit for other dependents? Right? So, are they qualified and do they qualify you? Those are the two questions, really. To claim a child as a dependent, the child must be a family member who meets certain eligibility criteria. This is known as the relationship test. This requires that the child be the taxpayer's son, daughter, stepchild, foster child, brother, sister, half brother, half sister, step brother, step sister, or a descendant of any of these individuals, okay, that I just named. The child has to be under a certain age. This is the age test. Okay, one of the three following criteria must be true to pass this test. The child was at least 19 years of age at the end of the year and younger than the taxpayer and their spouse if they are married and filing jointly. Okay, they have to be younger than you. They have to have been less than 19 at the end of the year and younger than the taxpayer and their spouse if they are married and filing jointly. The child was a full-time student and less than 24 years at the year end and younger than the taxpayer and spouse. If they are married and filing income tax jointly again, okay, the child was a full-time student and less than 24 years. And then the other one is the child is over these age limits but is permanently and totally disabled as determined by a doctor. Okay, if the child is over these age limits but is permanently and totally disabled, then you can still claim them. Now, the child, number two, no, number three rather, the child must live with the taxpayer. This is the residency test. The child must have lived with the taxpayer for more than half the tax year. There are exceptions for temporary absences. For example, if the child was away at college, in hospital, or in juvenile detention. For children who were born or died during the tax year, for kids of divorced or separate parents, and for kidnapped children. Okay. Number four, the child can't provide more than half of his or her own financial support. Well, there's some kids that have a lot of money these days, so that test is important too. Okay, next is qualifying relative. A qualifying relative is a person who is not a qualifying child and satisfies the following three tests. A qualifying relative can be any age. The relationship test is more inclusive, and the person has to be related to the taxpayer or live with the taxpayer. This means the person has one of these relationships to the taxpayer. They are a child, stepchild, legally adopted child, foster child, or a descendant of any of those people. For example, a grandchild or sibling, half sibling, step sibling, niece or nephew, including the kids of a half sibling, or is a parent or grandparent, step parent, aunt or uncle or in law, but not a foster parent. Okay. Number two, the person's gross income is below the limit of $4,700. Okay, this is 2023 now, right? This is 2024, but filing for 2023. Number three, the taxpayer must provide more than half of the person's total financial support for the year. Support generally includes household expenses such as rent, groceries, utilities, clothing, unreimbursed medical fees, travel, and recreation expenses. Okay, if you pay more than half, then that person qualifies. Okay. Taxable scholarship funds. If a dependent has taxable scholarship funds, they will need to file a dependent tax return to report those funds. Some scholarship funds are subject to taxation. If you have scholarship money left over after covering your qualified education expenses, you'll need to include that amount as part of your gross taxable income. That means scholarship money counts as income when calculating your tax liabilities when used to pay for the following things. Okay, if you use scholarship money to pay for room or board, utilities, and any other non-qualified expenses, including school supplies not listed as required in your program. So, if you have money left over after covering your qualified education expenses and use it on other costs, these funds generally count as taxable income. For example, if you use your scholarship funds for optional reading assignments that don't go towards satisfying course requirements and aren't required of every student, they would be subject to taxation. So parents usually report the 1098T received by their student on the parent's tax return. However, if scholarship income received in box 5 of the 1098T exceeds the amount reported in box 1 for qualified tuition and related expenses, the excess scholarship amount is considered taxable income and should be reported as income by the student on a dependent tax return. Okay, so we've lost some takeaways. A qualifying child does not have to be a biological child, but must have lived with the taxpayer for more than half of the year, meet specific age requirements, and be someone that didn't provide more than half of their own support for the year. Tax credits are available for qualifying children. However, those credits may be impacted by the taxpayer's overall filing status. Dependents may also be qualifying non non-child relative. Okay, so that's where we shall stop on those special statuses for now. Thank you again for watching taxes. And with time, we shall get this to where we use the technology to put all the stuff, all the information we're talking before your eyes so you can see what we are talking about.